Welcome to we're almost at 121 edition of Eric Sox. I'm duty geezer Leigh Allan, and with me my son and West Coast correspondent Will. And we're going to get into, we're recording this on Thursday after the first of the two Angels series. White Sox had 117 losses, so they got 4 more to go with 9 games to go, including games against the Padres and the Red Hot Tigers. Didn't think you'd hear that said, but they are. But we have had a pact not to put a penny in Jerry Reinsdorf's pocket, so I haven't gotten to a game all season. I could, it's possible to do it without putting a penny in his pocket. But Will did it the easy way since he's in Los Angeles and went to a game in Anaheim on Tuesday night where he saw, I would guess, is a prototypical White Sox performance where they got shut out.
It absolutely was. It was a beautiful night in Anaheim. So I was at game 2 of the 3-game series. They went on to lose game 3 in delightful White Sox fashion as well, including the return of Yoan Moncada to come up in a heroic moment and then strike out and blow it.
But on a pitch, incidentally, that was ball cap bill high.
Yeah. But game 2 in Anaheim, great. A ton of White Sox fans in the house. A ton of White Sox fans.
Well, there weren't a ton of anything. I saw the pictures.
I know. But I guess if you think about
it,
there were probably only 15,000 people there, maybe. And which, for the White Sox, after playing in Chicago and then going to play in Oakland, would have been the largest crowd they had seen in quite some time.
No. Hispanic Heritage Night. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, coincidentally, it was Mexican Heritage Night at the Angels Stadium, in which they did zero promotion for it whatsoever. You would never have known unless you accidentally were there, which is when I was there. But it was very cool. Cool dancers on the warning tracks. Props to the Angels for that. So a lot of White Sox fans. I would say probably about 30% in the ballpark were White Sox fans. I talked to as many of them as I could, and it seemed like everybody was there for the exact same reason that I was there, which was they've got these tickets when we thought it was possible that it was going to be game 120 or lost 120 and lost 121. But it was a beautiful night. We saw very classic White Sox baseball. I was there with some friends from the Dodgers, and I told them, I was like, look, you guys, I guarantee you're going to get a strikeout for Luis Robert on a ball in the dirt. I promise. You'll get an additional strikeout of his choosing. You'll get some bonehead plays. The White Sox were not charged with any errors in this game. They were not charged with them. However, as someone who was sitting about 4 rows behind the White Sox dugout, and I realized the trajectory of tossing a ball over the net would be challenging for the average person. But both Miguel Vargas and Nicky Lopez tried to throw me a ball at the end of an inning, and both of them were charged with throwing errors for trying to get me this ball. Both balls ended up in the hands of Angels fans, and there was nothing I could have done about it. So I got to see some real White Sox baseball. Granted, it was between the innings and not during the innings. I will say that team, first off, we've talked about this a lot in the past, how the White Sox do not seem to warm up for baseball games. They don't seem to stretch. They don't seem to prepare. That could not have held more true than it did in Anaheim. Before the game, only two guys out on the field. And that was Luis Robert, who was doing the most mild tension band stretching you've ever seen, and Miggy Vargas, who did a couple sprints back and forth. Nobody else from the team went out on that field in the hour before the game. Nobody else was outside prepping for that game on a beautiful night. It's not like it was 110 degrees and they were told to prep inside. This was 70 degrees, perfect conditions for baseball. No preparation, it seemed, whatsoever. And then in the dugout, they just seemed like a bunch of guys who just happened to be there. Nobody seemed particularly interested in the fans who were there and nobody was there booing them. Nobody was there jeering them. Everybody was there to support them, and they were cheering for the White Sox. They were shouting out to the players. No interest from those guys that anyone was there to watch them play baseball. I find it really mind-blowing that you can be in the situation that you're in, see people still there to support you, and not show any interest in them.
I wonder if they're just so depressed as a group that
which is
there's
possible.
just no reaction left.
Energy was low, but at the same time, they didn't look like a bunch of depressed guys. They looked like a bunch of guys who just didn't care about any of this. And that's easy to understand as well. But you would think that you would be doing everything in your power not to lose 121 games. I mean, if I was on that team, I would tell those guys, you guys, we have one thing we can do here. We can either be the worst team in history or we can not be the worst team in history. So let's put everything we have in the tank. Let's put it into these games. Let's go out there. Let's avoid 121. And now, it seems virtually impossible to avoid 121.
They'd have to have a couple huge upsets in San Diego, for example, to even head that way.
And like you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, they're going to be playing a San Diego team that still has a chance at winning the West. They're certainly a playoff team, but they have a chance at winning the West. They're only 3.5 games behind the Dodgers. They hold the tiebreaker. So San Diego is very much in contention to win this division, especially with 3 games coming up against the White Sox. So they are going to face a very, very motivated San Diego Padres team. If you are the Padres,
they will not face Dylan Cease. He pitched last night, Wednesday night.
Right, but that means he will pitch against the Dodgers next week. So they are set up to potentially take this division. What the Padres cannot do is lose to the White Sox. What they cannot do is lose a single game to the White Sox. So they are extremely motivated. The Detroit Tigers, who we are going to finish the season with, shockingly will be motivated. Hopefully,
half a game out of a wild card.
Half a game out. So if the Tigers can hold on to this, then they will be extremely motivated for those last 3 games. I, in my preseason baseball pool, actually picked the Tigers as a wild card team. It looked like a pick of lunacy for most of this season, but now I'm starting to feel pretty great about it. So the White Sox are up against, they have 3 series left, and 2 of them are against teams that desperately need to win baseball games, and that's not going to go well for them. In between, they have another series against the Angels in Chicago. That is going to be as boring as it can be, unless the White Sox lose the 3 games in San Diego, which will put them at 120, which means they get to go home. I have a feeling the fans are going to show up at the opportunity to see Lost 121, and the Angels will want to hand it to them. So I think they are in a really, really difficult situation of facing 3 teams that for different reasons are going to want to really, really beat the White Sox, and of course can.
And, there was the Sun-Times a week or so ago did a survey of White Sox fans. I'm not sure what the format of the survey was, if it was online or telephone or I don't know. But they had over 80% saying we want them to set the record.
Of course.
And at this point, I'm one of them. I want them so I can be there. I've been there as a fan of the worst team in the history of the major leagues. I mean, that's something.
We talked about that a lot.
It's one thing just to be a fan of a really bad team, which I have been for, almost my whole life and all of your life.
The number one response I heard from people that I talked to at that game was, how mad are you going to be if they only lose 119? We will all be furious. We will be furious to go through this hellish season and end up as tied for the second worst team ever. Or even if you just get 120. If you get 120, you can still say that you're tied for the worst team ever. So that's pretty good. But what you really want is to seal the deal and get 121.
Yeah, and I would say at 122, you even have a worse percentage than the 62 Mets. So there's incentive there too.
Yeah.
121 would do, because all of the numbers, and how on our site at the end of a game wrap, Brett does all of the futility stuff. Every time, compared to the Spiders, compared to Detroit, compared to Philadelphia, and our own White Sox history, he does all that. The one nationally that every national writer harps on is the 120. The rest of them, they just kind of let go.
Yeah, I mean, anything before 1900 feels tricky to really consider a real.
I'm going to write about that this week. I've read a book of Charlie Comiskey's history. It was an apology for Charlie Comiskey. He said he wasn't really a bad guy. And the Black Sox were at fault, all the players. But that history, because he goes back, Comiskey was playing professional ball in the 1870s. And all the leagues came and gone, and teams came and gone, and players went all over the place, and there were riots in the stands and on the. I mean, I think that's why MLB refers themselves as organized baseball, because before 1901, even though the National League had existed for decades, it was not organized baseball.
Yeah. So I think we got to let the Cleveland Spiders record kind of go.
Well, it's gone now. So.
And everybody has agreed to that. Everybody is saying that 121's the number. You got to get 121. It was really rough watching them play in person. I mean, we've obviously been following. We've been watching a lot of games on TV. It's so much worse in person. And it's just the total lack of motivation. And this was something I talked about with a lot of people there as well. How hard it is to see Luis Robert be so bad.
Oh yeah.
Just because he's got the capabilities of almost anyone in this league. And to see him go out, I mean, his first at bat, I don't know if you watched any of this game on Tuesday.
Too late for me.
His first at bat was 2 short-armed half swings at pitches, sliders, which of course we know are kryptonite, and then a fastball straight down the middle that he just watched. And I was like, who could possibly watch this guy and think I should give him hundreds of millions of dollars in a few years? This is a guy who's not just squandering a season, but he could be squandering his career based on the effort he has taken into this job. It's unbelievable. And it's kind of the most disappointing thing for me this entire season, just because we knew that they were going to be bad. Like, there was no world where the White Sox were going to be good this year. But seeing him just kind of completely fold has kind of been the low point for me. And seeing it in person just felt even worse. This is a guy where, I've got a Luis Robert jersey. I was as big of a Luis Robert fan as you could possibly be. And after watching him on Tuesday night, I'm like, are you done? Are you done with baseball? Or are you just done till you go somewhere else? But you're not putting in a good argument that anyone else should have you. We made all these arguments of Luis Robert will get the biggest prospect haul at the trade deadline we've ever seen. Well, I'm sure every team in baseball is sitting around thinking, thank God we didn't sell the farm to get this guy. I mean, he just looks absolutely miserable up there. It's unbelievable to see. It really is. And you got a couple guys who look okay, but you don't really have anybody who looks better than okay for the White Sox.
What do you think? Let's pick out a player, because obviously you watch Miguel Vargas in Los Angeles. I'm sure you've chatted with Miguel Vargas in the past. You know its personality and everything else. We know the depressed photo, video in the dugout. He's been awful. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't great for the Dodgers, but he wasn't bad. Perfectly adequate utility infielder. He's been awful.
Yeah.
Do you think his personality is just such that they tossed into this horribleness, he can't personally recover from it?
It's interesting with Miggy because he is like a famously good clubhouse guy, and was in Los Angeles. In fact, there were times where the only reason I think he was in the dugout and not in Oklahoma, is because everybody loved him so much. And he was okay for the Dodgers. He was honestly, people say, "Oh, I can't believe we got rid of Miggy." I don't think there's any chance Miggy's on the Dodgers right now anyway. You bring up you get Tommy Edman, and we have all sorts of guys we've been trying out to kind of fill those spots. I don't think Vargas was the answer for any of that. Now, Vargas before the game actually seemed like the only guy who was happy to be playing Major League Baseball. He was the only one sort of joking around. He, at least kind of waved to a couple fans. He was out there with Luis, clearly like they have made some sort of connection. I think for Vargas is one, he's just not that good. But two, how do you survive that mentally? How do you go from, a locker? I'm trying to think where his locker was. He's got a locker next to Max Muncy and 2 lockers over from Mookie Betts, and then Freddie Freeman's across. Shohei Ohtani is right across the clubhouse from him. Yamamoto's next to him. How do you go from that environment, and that's where you're going to work every day, to what you're going to in Chicago, and not be? And the other thing is, Vargas isn't one of those guys where it's like, "Oh, you're making bajillions of dollars. Like, suck it up." Yeah, you're still getting paid a lot of money to play a kid's game. But it's not a situation where it's like, well, he's going to Chicago. He's still making $27 million. So suck it up. For Vargas, it feels more of like, oh, my dream was about to come true. My lifelong dream was about to come true. And now there's no chance at all of my lifelong dream coming true in this environment. So I actually do have a lot of sympathy for Vargas in that regard. I think if the Dodgers win the World Series, he still gets a ring, right? So
that would be up to the players. They vote, but from what you say about how beloved he was, he would get a ring.
He's 100% getting a ring. He would definitely get a ring if the players were voting on it.
And they can vote. They can vote him a share or a half a share or whatever they want to do there.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he'd be getting shares, but he might get a ring.
And usually for a player, because he was with him a long time, he was with him 2/3 of the season.
Yeah.
Typically, and Dodgers are mostly rich players, so they're not trying to grasp another $10,000 for themselves.
That's a good point.
Typically for this, he would get a half share, a third share. He would get some share of playoff money. It would not be a full share.
They definitely wouldn't. They wouldn't stiff Miggy Rowe. Not Miggy Rowe. We still have Miggy Rowe. Miggy Var. They wouldn't stiff him on that, I don't think. Just because everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. And the fans really liked Vargas as well. Fans really, really liked Miguel Vargas. So I do think he's got that going for him at least. But, I feel like if any of us were in that situation, it would be the only difference positive I can find, and that is you're more likely to play for the White Sox than you are for the Dodgers.
Absolutely.
But but being able to say, "Oh, I'm getting playing time for the worst team ever," I don't know that that's better than I'm platooned on a serious World Series contender with some of the best players in all of baseball on it. The Dodgers may not be serious World Series contenders because of the pitching injury situation, but the bats are so good, they are still a serious World Series contender, which is brutal. We should consider taking a break here, and I know you have something you really want to talk about, an article in The Athletic
Absolutely.
that came out today that seems like it's probably not pro Jerry Reinsdorf, and we are a notably well-known pro Jerry Reinsdorf podcast. So this will be a stretch for us to step over into this mindset. But hang in there, and we will be right back in just a minute on Sharing Sox. Welcome back to Sharing Sox. In the first half, we dissected my trip to Anaheim to watch the world's saddest circus. And now the geezer has something he wants to touch base on.
Well, this morning, and again, we're recording this on Thursday, what is it?
The 19th.
19th, yeah.
1:23 p.m. Central Time.
It's a day off, so we're good saying 117 losses and counting.
Yes.
The Athletic this morning had a very long piece titled "The Owner Who Thinks He Knows Everything." I think we can guess who that is. And it gets into all the dysfunction of the team, and there's the problems between Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn, and the problems of hiring Chris Getz and so forth. So we know all this stuff. We've discussed it at length. I've written about it many times. But they started out the article on something I didn't know. Maybe most Sox fans know this, but I never knew it. The White Sox charter an old 1980s era plane, their charter plane, has only 6 first-class type seats. The rest is economy seats.
Whoa.
The 29 other teams charter a 757 that's got enough first-class seats for every player and member of the coaching staff. I mean, these are big guys. I mean, can you imagine Jose Abreu is the one who comes to mind. But Jose could have been a middle linebacker, cramped a little economy class seat on your charter flight to the West Coast.
Imagine Gavin Sheets trying to sit in one of those seats. That is insane. I did not know that. So now going back to what we talked about in the first half with Miguel Vargas, wouldn't you be pretty depressed? You go from, I'm sure the Dodgers fly on essentially.
Hey, nobody likes to fly coach. And very few multimillionaires like to fly coach.
The Dodgers are probably flying on Jeff Bezos's private plane, and then you go over and you're taking a 1980, it's probably a defunct Continental Airlines, domestic route plane. That is crazy. That is crazy to me.
And that gets into things like not having any analytics. Yes, part of it is that Jerry Reinsdorf is living in the 1946s when he played stickball at Flatbush. And so he doesn't believe in any of the analytics. But a lot of it is just not putting money into it. The Dodgers, they're putting millions into it. And it's worth it because it's less than you're paying a typical utility infielder. And you've got all this information proprietary because you're doing it yourself. So no other team has this. The White Sox outsourced their main analytics to a third company.
Wow.
Which, as the article points out, means you're not getting any information that nobody else has. And you want all the information you can have that nobody else has.
Yeah.
And that they go into games not knowing much of anything about the opposing pitcher. It just isn't there. The pitchers will not get, as every other team does, maybe not the Rockies, specific information on this batter. This guy in under his hands and you're good, but you gotta make him lean first by going outside, then come back into. Now they're getting a generic. Well, your sinker probably would be working pretty well, so keep that going. And that's despite the fact that Ethan Katz is an analytics guy, which means somewhere up the line, nobody's giving him the information.
Yeah, absolutely. That is mind-blowing.
They got some new guy. A lot of the teams bring in it. This goes back to Moneyball and Jonah Hill's position there. A lot of teams bring in guys completely outside baseball because they're math and computer whizzes and know how to analyze data. And the White Sox apparently did that. The guy's gone already.
Wow.
It said in there that their analytics people typically last less than a year. They just leave because it's fruitless. They're doing all this work and none of it is translating because of Jerry Reinsdorf.
Wow, that is just
it's all. I mean, we've known all along it's all Reinsdorf, but this explained so many more things about his stupidity. and they're still calling him loyal about keeping Hahn and Williams forever and that kind of thing. I don't think loyalty has anything to do with it. I've never believed that. It is who will kiss his butt because he's a control freak. And if he's got guys he can totally control, then they're in jobs forever. It's not because he's loyal. It's because he's controlling them. And if he brings in somebody from outside instead of hiring Chris Getz without any kind of job search whatsoever, that person could have a brain.
Yeah.
The person has a brain.
Ambition.
That person has a brain. He's not going to go, I don't think we should do it that way, Jerry. We got to do it this way instead. I know you mean well, but that was great in 1975 when you just bought the team and had it a couple years. It's not great anymore. It's not going to happen. He's not going to get any negative feedback because he makes sure it's people who are kind of useless human beings. I mean, I really felt that about Rick Hahn. Here's a guy who's making $1 million, does not quit, not only when Tony La Russa is forced on him, but when Tony La Russa is forced on him, and he's not even told about the latest DUI. Reindorf keeps that a secret, and he doesn't quit. And then this article said that Hahn really wanted to be an analytics guy, but he couldn't convince Reinsdorf. Well, why don't you quit? It's not like you don't know where lunch is coming from. He's been making a 7-figure salary for numerous years. If you have an iota of self-respect, you quit. And they say Getz is too. Well, if he's not gone in a year, that means he has no self-respect either. No, he's not. Hahn could have gotten another job. He'd just been executive of the year in the short season.
Yeah.
I don't know that Getz is employable anywhere, but he could do something. He's a likable guy. He could be an announcer or something.
He could go to another organization and lead player development or something like that.
I don't know anybody wants him in charge of player development after his 7-year stint here.
Yeah,
maybe second assistant player development.
Miami, Colorado,
bench coach on your high A team. Yeah,
that is shocking to me. The thing about outsourcing the analytics. I mean, it's not shocking to me. I truly don't think I can talk about it, but the measures the Dodgers have taken recently for analytics and for technology are so unbelievably mind-blowing. I mean, I don't think I think I'm not supposed to talk about it just because I work there. It's not illegal stuff by any means. It's all brilliant stuff that is like, oh, this is what real teams do as technology advances. The fact that the White Sox don't even have in-house analytic guys, the fact that they're making their guys sit coach huge guys sit coach to go to baseball games. I mean, is there any point where, because this is just bad for baseball, it's bad for baseball that the Chicago White Sox are a joke. It's bad for baseball that they have an owner that puts their guys on a defunct continental domestic route airplane with 6 first-class seats. Is there any way that owners in baseball can stage a coup and say, we need you out of here?
He had a lot of power and he flaunted it. I mean, the 1994, that's on him. That was Jerry Reinsdorf hates the players. He's always hated. Again, it's the control freak thing. He hates the players. He hates the fans. He can't control the players because they got a very strong union. He can't control the fans because we just don't put our money into his pockets. I think he believes he's going to buy enough politicians to get his monument in the South Loop. I'm not sure he's right. I don't think he's right. I think Brandon Johnson may be close to being in his pocket, but I think Johnson has so little influence anymore. The whole city government I don't know how many aldermen he's got on his side anymore. Virtually none. Other thing is he's not, it's not like he doesn't have term limits. He's a goner. So even if he's got Brandon Johnson sort of in his pocket, it's not going to matter in the long run. And he'd have him long enough to get his $1 billion. But the city has $1 billion shortfall in the upcoming budget, and still a couple $100 million in this year's budget. And you've got all the problems in schools, and they're short so many policemen and firemen and the CTA and so on. the city, and and say, well, we just keep that same hotel tax going. That money can go anywhere. It's fungible. You could take hotel tax money and say, you're paying hotel tax money to help our schools and help our kids, or help our police, or help our police who are going to protect you while you're in our city. It.
And to be trying to do all this,
no state money is coming.
And of course, Reinsdorf has also said the White Sox are cutting payroll next year. He is showing no signs whatsoever of trying to make this a team worth watching. I mean, my hope would be that at some point the vote on this would go to the people, because I think there's a 0% chance that Chicago voters would approve giving Reinsdorf this money. I mean, look at what's happening.
I think if the Bears went to a plebiscite, that if it wasn't too big, it's possible, because the Bears are the Bears and they're kind of this total city institution.
Well, and you've only got one football team.
And exactly, there's one football team. There are two baseball teams. You've dragged this baseball team down into just absolute muck. I don't know if he'd get 20%. Depending on how much it was.
I don't think he would.
But if it's $1 billion or $2 billion that he wants, no, it's just not happening.
No way. I mean, these measures we've seen, not quite the same types of measures, but we've seen some on ballots this year, and people are saying no. They're voting no to stuff like this. And neither of those asks, I'm thinking of Kansas City in particular, were nearly as egregious as what Reinsdorf is asking for. And I think demanding, not just asking for, demanding essentially. And I just don't see any world. It'd be one thing. I think if you put together a great team and you win the World Series, or you make a deep run, you show everyone like, oh, the White Sox are legit. The White Sox are a team for Chicago to rally behind. I think you've got a shot. That's the thing, it is politics, and part of the politics is showing the fans that there's something to be fans of. I think if you decide, I'm going to spend a lot of money, I'm going to make us really good, and then I'm going to try to get help for this new stadium, I think you might get the help, because you're showing everyone we can be Chicago's baseball team. We can be great. But to do what he does over and over again to the team and to the fans, in what world is anyone in Chicago going to say, we need to get them a better ballpark so that you can start, Nicky Lopez and Miguel Vargas and Lenine Sosa? Like, we don't want you to have a good new ballpark that costs $2 billion, because we don't want to go watch this team. It'd be different if it was a scenario where you've created a product that everybody wants, and everybody wants to be there and wants to be able to say that they've been there, wants to be able to say, oh, I've got season tickets to the White Sox. But right now, nobody wants those tickets. Nobody wants single game tickets. Nobody wants season tickets.
Well, no, but remember, for game 121, for loss 121, they could sell a lot of tickets.
They'll sell a lot of tickets for loss 121. That's right. So that's going to leave Reinsdorf two options. Put no money in and make the team worse and go for loss 122 next year, or try to win baseball games. And we know he's not going to try to win baseball games. So I just think there's absolutely no way that they get this new stadium, which is why I'm like, can the owners stage some sort of coup to say, we got to get this guy out of here? They're a tough team to even deal with.
I don't know what the rules are in baseball. Of course, it happened in the NBA, but that was a kind of morality clause thing with Sacramento.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't know that there's anything, but Reinsdorf's power is gone. His power was with Bud Selig. He was tight with Bud Selig. Yeah. He is not tight with the commissioner now, or the commissioner's office. I don't think the commissioner's office even likes him. He wasn't put on the negotiating committee last time around. Apparently those are rotating jobs, but he could have kept himself on if he really had power, and he didn't. So
why would you want him around? Why?
So I don't think Manfred wants anything to do with him. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to the sport.
It's embarrassing to the sport. And I think that is the bottom line here, is that it is embarrassing for the sport of baseball to have something this pathetic going on. I mean, it's such a blatant tanking. And, there are punishments for that in baseball. And, the White Sox aren't going to have the first pick in any draft, even if they're the worst team in baseball history. There is nothing redeeming about being this bad. It is just embarrassment. It is just embarrassment for the game. And if I was, the other owners, I'd be looking at how do we get this guy out, because the White Sox brand can be a very good brand. I mean, in
It's the third
2005,
biggest market,
it
and a
was a
team
very
that's
good brand.
been in the major league since 1901.
I know when people friends talk about, they're like, oh, well, they're small market, and I'm like, no. Do you
It's
call
the
the
third
Cubs
largest
small
city in the
market? They're
country.
like, no, the Cubs aren't small market, and I'm like, it's the same market. It's the same market. We're only small
They're
market.
5 miles apart on a train.
Yeah, it's
that costs you $1.25.
Ludicrous. He is there. Nothing will change with the White Sox until Reinsdorf is gone. My big fear at this point is that we're going to have an Oakland situation probably next year. And it's just going to get uglier and uglier and uglier until there's no fans left and there's just nothing to be excited about. And then who knows what happens to the Chicago White Sox at that point. And this is a very famous historical organization that should be treated with a lot more
he
respect.
threatened to move them back in the
Yeah.
last time in the 80s when he got his new stadium. He's indirectly threatened this time, saying, well, I wouldn't move, but if I have to sell the team, whoever buys it might move them. I mean,
He's always their argument.
Reinsdorf is a horrible, horrible human being. Forget he's a terrible baseball guy. He's a horrible baseball, and not just tight-fisted. A lot of owners are tight-fisted. A lot of business are. When we owned a business, I was tight-fisted, but it's way beyond that. It's into the revenge levels, and it's pathetic. He's a pathetic human being.
I think we nailed it. I think we found the problem today. I think we found it. We discovered it. That is about all the time we have for today, to end on that delightful positive note. Do you have anything else you would like to discuss before we have to sign off this week?
No, I'm just doing the counting like every other White Sox fan in the White Sox universe.
Yeah, so off today, and then we got these 3 against the Padres in San Diego. I'm in a very sticky situation because I work for the LA Dodgers, and then having the San Diego Padres win 3 straight games is actually not good for my business at the moment. But I also, it's tough. I think I'm accidentally going to be rooting for the Padres this weekend. And then hopefully the Dodgers just win all their games as well, and it ends up not being a problem. But yeah, we will have to see what happens. My goodness, it has been a bleak season. We are almost to the end of it. Let's get this record. Let's have something to celebrate and talk about for the rest of our lives. And then maybe this will all have been worth something. So thanks so much for listening. We will be following this record as closely as you are, and we will be here to talk about it next time on Sharing Sox.